Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features Marvel Fanfare number 1, cover dated March 1982. Now this issue itself would have been on sale at the very end of 1981. It is a direct sales comic, so this was never on the newsstands. And you can see there that it's got a higher price for the era, $1.25, but all the pages are glossy and there's less in the way of advertisements in this. So direct sales meant that retailers of specialist comic shops would order how many copies of the comic they thought readers and customers would be interested in, and they were non-returnable. So you will find copies of Marvel Fanfare number 1 in good condition out there, and it's pretty worth your time and money if you can find one, because of the lead story, which is by Chris Claremont and Michael Golden. This is a Michael Golden cover here, and it features, of course, we would infer that it's Sauron because of the presence of Angel there. But interesting is the inclusion of Spider-Man, and a Michael Golden Spider-Man at that, because Michael Golden was an artist who was a fan favorite in the early to mid 80s for his work in particular at Marvel Comics. He's coming off a collaboration with Chris Claremont on Avengers Annual number 10, the one that introduces Rogue as a character and that looks at the aftermath of her permanent absorption of Ms. Marvel's powers. And so they're working together again, collaborating again on this 4-part story featuring a trip by Angel and Spider-Man to the Savage Land, where of course it would always be on the cards that you might meet someone like Carl Likos, aka Sauron. So great cover by Michael Golden, pencils, inks and colours by Michael Golden, and the interior story he also pencils, inks and colours the art. So let's open this one up to the first page, and we get a splash here. There's also a wraparound inside cover by John Byrne featuring Spider-Man, and the other back page has the Silver Surfer. You can just see the back of his board there. So the title of this chapter of the main story, which is the one I'm concerned with for this review, it's 17 pages long, is Fast Descent into Hell by Chris Claremont and Michael Golden. So as I said, Golden is penciling, inking and colouring this, because you can see down here he's credited as colorist too. That reminds me of Barry Windsor Smith's practice in the 80s, where you would get his work, particularly on an issue of Uncanny X-Men like 205, The Wounded Wolf Wolverine story, that classic story where Barry Windsor Smith was penciling, inking and colouring the art. And also he was co-plotting with Claremont. My sense is that Claremont would have handed Michael Golden a plot treatment for this comic, and that it's Golden who's laying out the pages and deciding on how to tell the story, the plot that Claremont has given him. And the rest of the creative team, Jim Novak doing the letters. So interesting splash idea. We get all our main characters here. Sauron there, Khazar, Lord of the Savage Land, Angel and Spider-Man. Pretty good poses there. We don't actually get to this scene in this particular chapter of the story. And then we're into the story here with this panel, which is a visual of New Mexico. And the opening third-person narration is, it begins 3,000 feet above the Continental Divide, just west of Truth or Consequences, New Mexico, on a dry, hot midsummer morning. So there's a helicopter here, and someone's asking the pilot how much further, and the pilot responds, "We're almost there, Ms. Anderson, and don't worry, if anyone can help you, Mr. Worthington can." So Ms. Anderson is looking for Warren Worthington, aka the Angel, to help her with some sort of problem. So this is a great double page spread here. Love the layouts on this page. So we're reading across the top tier of panels. You can see Michael Golden varying the layout with some open border panels such as here and here, and he'll do that also elsewhere in the comic. But great level of detail from Golden. That's what he was renowned for. Really well able to draw anything. Equipment, houses. Look at the 3-point perspective here on the top-down view of Warren's mountaintop, what would I call it, like a palazzo with a swimming pool here in New Mexico, a kind of eerie again. But look at the level of detail in the helicopter pilot's cockpit with Ms. Anderson there reading a copy of National Geographic. You can read the writing there as well, a pictorial special concerning the savage land, and you see a T-Rex there on the cover. It's pretty cool. He has to, she says, he's my only hope. So almost an echo there of Princess Leia in Star Wars, a very influential film on both Chris Claremont and Michael Golden. And then we're into the third person narration again by Claremont. Her name is Tanya Anderson, so a name that would be familiar to longtime readers of the X-Men, going all the way back to the Roy Thomas and Neil Adams run. A woman with haunted eyes. So any new readers, we're going to learn everything we need to know about her in the coming pages. So the pilot says to her, "We've arrived, ma'am. That's Mr. Worthington's mountaintop chalet, best view in these parts. The man said he wanted privacy, and that's what he got. It's 20 miles to the nearest decent public road and 20 more to the nearest town. Practically the only way in or out of this place is by air." And of course, we know that that's no problem for Warren Worthington III because he can fly. "That's Candy Southern," says the pilot. "The boss's lady waiting for us. Hold on tight, ma'am. We're picking up some turbulence. This landing may be a little rough." So that's Claremont adding in something that we don't really see in the artwork there, but maybe something that's specific to the New Mexico mountains. I don't know. But again, just great work by Golden there. All the details you need in order to have a sense of place and space. Interesting top-down angle here. Candy Southern's wrap is blowing in the wind of the helicopter rotors, probably as the pilot takes off again. A few hectic minutes later, "Miss Southern, I'm Tanya Anderson," and Ms. Anderson introduces herself. And Candy isn't so formal. She says, "Call me Candy. Welcome to Warren's Airy, our home away from home." So Tanya asks, "Where is Mr. Worthington? Surely he's expecting me. Please, it's imperative that I see him." So she's fairly, what would I say, like focused on the reason that she's there. She's not really into relaxing. She's got a mission. And Candy is relaxed. She says, "You will. As for where he is, you probably passed him on your way down. He's up visiting some friends." So here we go. And Claremont hasn't written Angel very much. And we'll get the reason for that shortly as well. In the footnote there, "Meet Warren Worthington III, sole heir to one of America's larger private fortunes. He was your basic, everyday, happy-go-lucky, slightly spoiled rich kid until he hit puberty and sprouted wings. You see, Warren, perhaps better known as the High-Flying Angel, one of the founding members of the Uncanny X-Men, is a mutant. He left the X-Men some time ago, X-Men 94 there, and after an abortive attempt to establish a superhero group of his own, the Champions, finally settled down to run the family business left him by his dead parents." Yeah, so this is Claremont turning to a character that he hasn't done a lot of work with, and I wonder, is that the appeal for him here, to write this story with Angel in order to figure out Angel's character? So Angel here, after flying around with the Eagles, sees that Candy's arrived. Looks like my guest has arrived a wee bit ahead of schedule. So he bids farewell to the Eagles, whom he's named Icarus and Daedalus. So from Greek myth, "I'd like to fly with you guys a while longer." He says, "Heck, I'd like to stay up here forever, but Judy calls." So that's Claremont communicating to us that Warren's mutant power is something that hasn't brought him pain or suffering. Rather, he enjoys it. He loves flying around. with the Eagles in the New Mexico air. And so after the traditional social amenities and a bite of brunch, they get down to why Tanya Anderson is there. And I love the detail here of Warren's chalet, all the furniture there, the kind of the modern art sculpture there on the coffee table, and also the body language he gives the different characters. How Tanya looks concerned and worried, whereas Candy looks super relaxed. And she gets down to it. I want you to help me find Carl Likos. So Candy will ask the question any new reader might have, who? And we're going to get an explanation now. So we've got a collage of images here that go over the origin story of Carl Likos. He was a childhood friend, later the man I loved, says Tanya. I first met him in Tierra del Fuego, so the southern tip of South America, where he saved my life. In gratitude, my father raised Carl after Carl's own father died suddenly. Carl put himself through medical school, became a brilliant, though unorthodox physician. And this is an interesting little detail here. You can see that young Carl Likos is reading a book, and it's Tolkien's Fellowship of the Ring. So a reader of the Lord of the Rings, which ties into the name he gives the monster he becomes. But nothing he did made him worthy in my father's eyes of my love. And you can see the skepticism on the father's face there as well. That's really well done by Michael Golden. And she continues, none of us knew Carl was living under a terrible curse. I've read his notes. To live, he had to drain energy from other living beings. Finally, an overdose of such energy transformed him into a monster he christened Sauron. So he got the name from the Lord of the Rings, from Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. And then she continues, he tried to kill my father. So we see him going up against the original X-Men there. Fought the X-Men, then fled to his home in Tierra del Fuego. After the decent human side of his personality won out over his evil Sauron self, there, rather than live with his incurable curse, he decided it would be better not to live. So this is all summary of information that older readers would have learned in Roy Thomas and Neil Adams' X-Men 60 and 61. After that, she says, I never went home, never spoke to my father again. I joined the Peace Corps and spent 2 wonderful, backbreaking years working in the Andean highlands. Yet no matter what I did or how hard I tried, I couldn't forget that Carl had become an energy vampire because of me. You see, he'd been infected by the pteranodons, which still exist in Tierra del Fuego, whose nest I'd unwittingly disturbed. In saving me, he'd condemned himself. If I'd defied my father and stayed with Carl, I might have been able to help him. So, in the course of these 3 panels at the bottom, we've got some great art there, including, I really like this panel where she's helping out in the Andean highlands there. You've got the different style of architecture as well. Really well done. And again, Michael Golden making use of either having a panel border or taking it away for a varied layout effect. This is another nice layout here, like moving away from this kind of sequence of flashback panels. We're back to a more straightforward panel layout of a 6-panel grid. But again, you can see how he keeps things interesting. 1, 2, 3, 4 panels with a border and then an open border panel here. Really well done. And you get a nice look at his version of Angel as well, a kind of a golden-haired Adonis living with his goddess Candy Southern, both of them almost wearing hardly any clothes in their mountaintop eyrie. So again, interesting to see the way that Claremont is thinking about Warren Worthington and how his mutant power is not a curse for him, and how he's living, very much literally and figuratively the high life, the good life in the mountains. So what does he have to say? What's his life philosophy here? And it'll be interesting to contrast this with what happens to him in X Factor when Apocalypse removes his wings and tries to turn him into one of his horsemen in the future, and he becomes Archangel. This is what he says in 1981. Life is full of ifs, Tanya, but cliche though it is, what's done is done. You can't change the past, so why keep needlessly tormenting yourself about it? As you yourself said, Carl Likos is dead. So that's his philosophy then, but it isn't that subsequent to the changes that Apocalypse makes to him. In any case, Tanya replies, that's what I thought until I read this magazine article about the Savage Land. One photo in particular caught my eye. I checked with the editors. It was taken less than 6 months ago. The man standing beside Khazar, Lord of the Savage Land, is Carl Likos. So this is the copy of National Geographic she was looking at. I want to go to the Savage Land to find him. I'd like you, Angel, to come with me. So he stands up at this point and he says, looking away from her, you're crazy. And then she says, if you agree, I'll donate $1 million to your favorite charity. So he turns his head towards her, but you can see that look, the furrowed brow on his face. He says, my help isn't for sale, Ms. Anderson. Has it occurred to you that, assuming he's alive, Likos hasn't left the Savage Land because he hasn't wanted to leave? Perhaps he's made peace with himself and his curse down there. He might even be happy. Why not leave him be? And so you can see there's a single teardrop there. She's shaking a little bit. She's pulling what's it called again? She's pulling a handkerchief out of her bag to dab her eyes. Because I love him. Can you understand that? With or without your help, I'm going. So that affects him. He says, he pleads with her, don't cry, Tanya, please. I think I'm going to regret this, Candy. And she affirms his decision. I'll pack your bags, you big softy, you. So there you go. By the way, look at the way that Golden is rendering Candy's anatomy there. And you've got her flat stomach as well, and just the slight indication of the abdominal muscles as well. But different, obviously, from Warren's there. So appropriate to a female figure, an athletic female figure. Really, really well done. And again, you know, what he's doing in terms of his style of rendering, we've got hatching, but no cross-hatching really. Even as I say that, there's a little bit of cross-hatching there on the shoulder muscles. But in general, it's more single-line hatching rather than cross-hatching in this era before that all gets changed by the arrival of the likes of Arthur Adams as a fan favourite penciler in a couple of years' time. And Arthur Adams, influenced by Michael Golden, of course. So then the scene shifts, and we have a nice little caption there indicating the shift in time. The next few days are busy ones for all concerned as Warren pulls some strings, cashes in some IOUs to get clearances and government assistance for the trip to Antarctica. He does his best to keep the project quiet, and for the most part, he's pretty successful with one notable exception, the press. So the Daily Bugle, for some reason, J. Jonah Jameson has got word of this trip to Antarctica, and he's had a brainwave. But look at this panel. I think this is fantastic. Again, we've got 3-point perspective here. The drawing of those individual letters for the title on the Daily Bugle building, that's difficult to do. But look at all the level of detail up here. The rooftop, you even get to see into the windows of the offices there, the desks, the typewriter there. Really Michael Golden unafraid of adding detail to his artwork. And again, another great panel here where we get to see the inside of the Daily Bugle offices, and you've got a little Easter egg there, a little caricature of Al Milgrom, the editor of Marvel Fanfare there, working frantically at a typewriter. So it's good, and everybody looking sweating and worried, trying to get their copy done for the latest edition of the Daily Bugle with those daily deadlines for the printers. So Jonah asks for both Peter Parker and his managing editor, Joseph Robbie Robertson, to come in to his office, and then he gets down to it. So he's gotten wind of the expedition to the Savage Land, and he says to both of them, I've managed to secure for the Bugle exclusive world rights to the story. All we need now is someone to cover it. same member of our staff who's been there. So recently, or not recently, but in Spider-Man's history, Amazing Spider-Man issues 103 to 104, Spider-Man went to the Savage Land, and Peter Parker gets it. You mean me? You're going to send me back to the Savage Land? Well, what I mean is, yeah, Spider-Man was in the Savage Land, but so was Peter Parker. So he says here, not a chance, because of course J. Jonah Jameson doesn't know his identity as Spider-Man. I really like the layout on this particular page. Those 6 panels, and then the background is the helicopter that takes them to the Savage Land there. Towards the bottom of the page, but you've got the Antarctic mountains there in the background, and again all these colors by Michael Golden as well. It's really, really effective stuff. So Jonah Jameson says, I won't take no for an answer, Parker. Peter demurs still, I almost got killed the last time I was there, remember? And Jonah says, he tries to persuade him by saying, think of the fame, the glory, the assignment is a shoo-in for a Pulitzer. Parker there, backing away from the cigar smoke, says, you want it so badly, Jonah, then you go. And Jonah getting all dramatic here. This is good, kind of interesting characterization from Claremont, and also great acting in the art as well by Golden. That's gratitude for you, says J. Jonah. I make the boy a star and he turns on me. And Robbie, the voice of reason, says, Jonah, it is dangerous. So's riding the subway, counters Jonah. So this is a great little sequence here where we've got Peter on one side of the page and J. Jonah on the other, with the cigar jutting out of his mouth. And in between them, the conciliator, the mediator, the negotiator, Robbie, lighting up his pipe. So Peter here is saying, well, I might change my mind. What will it take? Money? Never, says Jonah. He's got you over a barrel, Jonah. Some help you are, turncoat. And then Robbie makes the point, Peter has college expenses, medical bills for his Aunt May. So Jonah gives in, all right. Work out the sordid details with Parker, Robbie. But I want my money's worth, Parker. If you don't come back with a prize-winning story, don't bother coming back at all. That's really nicely done by Claremont. So Claremont, doesn't work with the Spider-Man cast of characters very often. But here you can see that he's well capable of getting the character dynamics right, the voices right, and when he's working with somebody like Michael Golden, it all looks beautiful, and the characters, the expressions on their faces, it's so well done. So here we are, 100 odd hours later. Peter Parker's beginning to wonder who suckered who in Jonah's office, as a US Navy Sikorsky helicopter claws its way eastward from the main American Antarctic base at McMurdo Sound towards the jagged, forbidding peaks of the Eternity mountain range that surround and shield the Savage Land. I like the detail of the frosty wind there as well. You can see Michael Golden cutting in some white paint there to give that effect. That's really, really well done. Also, there's a use of a screen tone there as well for shadows on the side of the mountains. Really, really well done. So, another really detailed establishing shot of the inside of the helicopter, something I know that Jim Lee would have been looking at in particular, because you can see some of his work, especially around Uncanny X-Men 274, that kind of is almost imitating this in a way. The terrain below is desolate, as forbidding and inhospitable as any on Earth, and yet it possesses a fierce elemental beauty that cannot help but stir the soul. Classic Claremontian prose there. So the pilots are given lines as well. Coming up on the mist wall, skipper, seems thicker than usual this trip, so the Savage Land has a mist that surrounds it as well as those Eternity mountains. The pilot continues, the co-pilot continues. Good thing we laid in navigation beacons and a forward base. Makes flying through this soup a lot less hairy. So that's what, also typical of Claremont's work. You get very well thought out stories in terms of the procedurals of flying to the Savage Land. What would that be like? Where would you start from? What kind of mode of transport would you use? And what kinds of strategy would the pilots have to ensure that they know where they're going and can make it through that mist wall that the co-pilot mentioned. So the captain of the helicopter says, seemed like the sensible thing to do, Sammy, with all the traffic going in and out of the Savage Land these days. Next thing you know, they'll be opening a Kazar Hilton. So Peter's thinking to himself, things sure have changed since I was last here. Who knows, maybe this trip will be dull and boring and peaceful. I should be so lucky. You know, if it was, would we be reading this? And Angel thinks to himself, funny, last time I came to the Savage Land, I was chasing Carl Likos. I almost died then. But the X-Men's arch enemy, Magneto, saved my life for reasons of his own. So a call back again to the Neil Adams and Roy Thomas run. And during that time period, Chris Claremont, a very young Chris Claremont, was interning at Marvel Comics. And he was around and present when Roy Thomas and Neil Adams were working on that particular storyline. So interesting that he's calling back to that now as the main writer of the X-Men characters. And what does Tanya think to herself there? I pray I'm doing the right thing. The odds against her finding Carl are as huge as the Savage Land itself, but I have to try. So she's determined. And then suddenly, complication. So there's a big pterosaur that crashes into the helicopter. This is all really well done by Michael Golden. And so they're going to have to abandon ship. And it's all in a panic. So the pilots have their parachutes on. And look at the way they're coming out the window there. Not opening it up like that and jumping out. Angel is fine, of course, with his wings. But Tanya isn't wearing a parachute. She falls out. You can see the panic on her face. Also the way the wind is whipping her clothing, her hat off, the fur of her coat as well, her fur-lined coat. Of course, Angel is there, able to save her. The helicopter explodes, and they're wondering, what about Parker? And there he is. So much for my dull, boring, peaceful trip, he thinks to himself. Boy, am I glad I wore my web shooters under my clothes. After a welcome like this, though, I wonder what's waiting for us on the ground. So the pilots are out safe. Peter's out safe with his improvised web parachute. And sometime later, so the helicopter's wrecked and burning up there, but everybody survived. And Peter arrives. As soon as I get back to New York, I'm going to punch Jameson right in the nose for making me an offer I couldn't refuse. Then I'm going to punch myself in the nose for accepting it. And then he says aloud, hiya folks, long time no see. So that's funny stuff enough from Claremont. So what are they going to do next? Well, first of all, Angel is worried about the pilots, but Peter communicates they landed way up the cliff near the top. They looked okay. They waved their radios. I floated by. They're probably calling for help right now. So the heroes don't have to go rescue the pilots. So we can continue down in the Savage Land. Angel, though, thinks the Navy has an emergency, or says the Navy has an emergency station on the far side of the mountains. I think I should fly us out to it. But Tanya is adamant that they don't leave. And Peter backs her up. We've come this far, Angel. The least we can do is have a look around. So they make their way closer to the warmer parts of the Savage Land. You can see the trees and shrubbery changing. Tanya's grateful to Peter that he backed her up. And he says, I wasn't really, but it'll be dark soon, and in this neighborhood it gets real dark real fast. I figure we'll be better off finding shelter for the night before leaving first thing in the morning. Okay, and then he says, in the meantime, I guess there isn't much harm in some sightseeing. As I recall, these highlands are pretty barren. Most of the nasty beasties and people live lower down in the jungle, so that's where the dinosaurs are primarily. And then Angel has spotted something. They scramble up a steep, broken scree, not knowing what to expect. And then we get this big anchor image of a wrecked futuristic city. It's a monument to the dreams of an ancient reincarnated mad god named Garrock. Dreams that almost destroyed the Savage Land and in the end consumed the god himself. So this is a reference to Claremont and Burns issues 113 to 116 of Uncanny X-Men. And then Peter Parker gets his spider sense starts tingling. We're going to have some action. I better get some pictures, he's thinking. But then his spidey sense tingling. And this is a great little panel here where we've got Tanya and Peter there, and they're turning around and looking at this horde of Savage Land warriors coming right towards them. So I really like the layout on this page, these vertical panels. So a tier of 6 panels, 6 panel grid, but it's tall vertical panels. And look at the rhythm of the layout here, the visual layout, where you've got a bordered panel, borderless, bordered, borderless, bordered, and borderless. It's really well done. It's interesting. It keeps things interesting for the reader, and it's very thoughtful on Golden's part. So you can see there that obviously these guys aren't going to catch the angel because of his power to fly, but then he runs into an air force. This complicates things. He thinks to himself, before I fly Peter and Tanya to safety, I've got to get rid of these Bronze Age Red Barons. Shouldn't be too hard though. And then he's caught with a blast of vertigo. Suddenly Angel's world turns topsy-turvy inside his head as the senses he depends on for his survival all go haywire at once. So he doesn't understand it. Everything's spinning. He sees pterodactyl riders heading his way. He tries to dodge their attack, only to end up flying straight into the war axe of one of them and then falling into that net below, we infer. So how's Peter and Tanya doing? Well, Peter's thinking, Angel's down now, they're concentrating their attention on us. The odds are too great. My secret identity be hanged. If I don't uncork my Spidey powers, we're as good as dead. So they're at a cliffside. There's a river below. Tanya says, we're backed up against the edge of a cliff above a river. We can't run anymore. And Peter asks her, a river? Lady, that's just what the doctor ordered, Tanya. Can he swim? Of course, she says, and he pushes her off. Boop. Off she goes into the water below. Not bad, he thinks to himself. She turned her fall into a passable dive. I remember that river from my first visit here. If it's not too rough, and at this altitude, there are no aquatic people-eating predators. I'll be down to help Tanya long before she reaches any of the danger areas. In the meantime, I've got to get this barbarian horde off our backs. So they're running after him. He's disrobing there, and then bottom panel here we see that he's gotten into a Spider-Man costume, and he deals with the opposition in his own unique style. So these guys have got no chance against Spider-Man's super strength and agility. And here we go. We got a nice anchor image there of Spider-Man having bested those warriors. Now to get after Tanya, he thinks, but he gets blasted with that vertigo. Everything's upside down. What's happening to me? He's baffled. Someone behind me, but he can't get a bearing. So he's bopped on the side of the head with a spear. And he's thinking to himself, my head, that shot ought to be worth a minor concussion at least. But it also unscrambled my brains. I've had attacks of vertigo, dizziness before, but nothing like that. So he sees how big his opponent is. And in the third person narration, we learn it's Gaza. He's blind. He's a mutant also. Although the giant is unique, he's not alone. He has companions, each one as powerful and dangerous in his own way as Gaza. And one of these is Barbarous, the four-armed brute. Spidey barely has time to note the man's four arms before they pound him mercilessly into oblivion. That's really well done there by Golden. The implication of the force of the fist coming down on the back of Spider-Man's head, the narrowed eyes on his mask, and his chin being beaten into the ground. What's going on with Tanya? Time passes, and far downriver, Tanya Anderson struggles through the thick verdant undergrowth. She's been on the run ever since she hit the water, forced to keep moving by constant patrols of pterodactyl riders. For all her spunk and stamina, she knows she's near the end of her rope. So I really like the way that Claremont implies like what's been going on since, states what's been going on since she was knocked into the river. That it hasn't just been a case of her floating down the river and coming to shore now, but that she's been evading pterodactyl riders. That's really well done. And she thinks to herself, as I surfaced, I heard a victory cheer. That means those warriors probably captured Peter as well, or killed him. So now she's wondering, why did I come here? Why didn't I take Angel's advice? Am I as mad, as driven, as cursed as Sauron? And then she thinks, no, I can't give up. Peter and Angel may still be alive. If I can find Khazar, he might be able to rescue them. So what's this tail in the river? Or avenge them? What's that sound? It's a Tyrannosaurus Rex. That's not good. And I love the way that it's a silent panel as well. Great combination of colour, silhouetting. Yeah, really well done by Golden. Let's turn the page. So that's a cliffhanger in terms of what's going to happen to Tanya there. But elsewhere, Spidey's waking up. He makes a joke, of course. Anybody got an aspirin? I got such a headache you wouldn't believe. And then here we see what the situation is that he's waking up into. So he's pinned to this board, and there is something directed at him there. This machine, this contraption. And we have, well, let's get into the dialogue. You're awake. Incredible. Barbarous beating would have crushed a dozen ordinary men. Welcome, human, to the citadel of our creator, Magneto. I'm called Brainchild. I'm master here. Blind Gaza and Forearm Barbarous, you've already met. My emerald-skinned comrade is Amphibious. There he is there. The young lady, Vertigo. We are mutants. Soon, with your help, all the angels, we will be rulers of the savage land, he says. This arcane device was used by Magneto to evolve us from simple swamp savages into our present superpowered incarnations. When Angel and his fellow X-Men defeated Magneto, this genetic transformer was destroyed. So that's a callback to issue 64 of X-Men. We have since repaired it, Brainchild continues, and added some interesting modifications. Now, in addition to performing its original function, it can also devolve any living being to its primordial beginnings. We'd originally planned to test our device on Khazar, of course, but now that you and Angel are here, that honor will be yours. So, this is a nasty situation, and Spider-Man thinks to himself, that's my cue. Sorry, big brain, but flawed though I may be, I like myself the way I am. So he breaks free of the manacle there, but the mutant Vertigo deals with him, and Brainchild switches on the machine. And when he's hit with the Vertigo, things are upside down and doubled there. You can see that in the art. And we're told in the narration, the harder Spidey fights the disorienting effects of Vertigo's power, the faster his world seems to spin around in circles. But still he struggles with all the strength of sinew and will in a desperate attempt to break free, an attempt that is doomed to failure from the moment Brainchild activates the Transformer. As the moments slide by, he finds it more difficult to think. Sentences drift out of reach than words, leaving him only primal physical feelings and responses: rage, pain, fear, hatred, lust. As simple as easily as an onion stripped of its skin, so is Spider-Man stripped of his humanity. And then the final black panel. He feels himself drowning in a black, oily whirlpool within his mind. A terrible, terrifying scream follows him down into the darkness as he's pulled inexorably under. At the last instant, with his last rational thought, he realizes that the scream is his. That's a really effective prose conclusion to the issue. Spider-Man's rational faculties are gone, and he has been devolved if this machine does as Brainchild says it can do. So what a cliffhanger to end this particular chapter of the story on. So this is chapter 1 of a 4-part story. 17 pages here, but really rich pages. A lot going on. Great writing by Claremont. Absolutely top-notch comics, drawing and colouring by Michael Golden. A really great collaboration between these two creators. Excellent stuff, and looking very much forward to the next chapter of this particular story. So I do hope that you enjoyed this review and commentary on Chris Claremont and Michael Golden's story from Marvel Fanfare #1. Let me know your thoughts on this one in the comments section. If you enjoyed my review and commentary, please like and share the video. It really does help the channel. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.